All right. I think we got it. Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Ropeadope Music and Arts Festival. We're kicking this off with a show straight from Los Angeles with Julian Pollock, a.k.a. J3PO. My name is Lewis. I am here at the Ropeadope Room in East Philadelphia, joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Fabian Brown. Mr. Brown, welcome.
Hello, Lewis. How you feeling?
I am nervous, as always. If you're not nervous, you're not doing it right.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
We've got a treat today. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hang out here. You know, he could be doing anything, anywhere in the world at this point. We have Julian J3PO Pollock here with us, hailing from Los Angeles. You know, when he's not busy on tour with Marcus Miller, he dove deep into creating his sophomore album. I believe he dubbed it as a pandemic album. There's probably a lot of those pandemic albums as you can think, right? What's really unique about this, it's a blend of like the old school production styles mixed in with some new jazz fusion. I don't even want to put a category around it. I want just to welcome Julian here to the call. Julian, how you feeling today, man?
Hey. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited about today. I'm so excited about the record and for people to be able to hear it. Maine's sophomore album right after Small Plates, and here we are celebrating.
No, I love it, and it's screaming on social media. It's screaming on some Spotify playlists. I'm really excited about the exposure that it's getting, and the responses that we're getting from a lot of the people from literally all around the globe, Julian. So excited to have you here again, and yeah, I just want to jump right into the conversation here. So sophomore album, mains. What should people be expecting? What should people be listening out for with this project?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the most important thing is just enjoy the sound and the feeling of the album. Obviously, maybe just talk briefly about the name of the album, Mains. It's the follow up to Small Plates, and as you can imagine, there is a sort of undertone of being at a restaurant. Food is a big part of my life. And yeah, Small Plates was the kind of that record kind of came about in a very kind of haphazard way, in the sense that it was sort of like a beat tape, maybe a little bit more involved, but it was definitely supposed to be small portions. A lot of the tracks are like a minute, and then the idea was to take those ideas, that way of making music, that concept, and to kind of expand it a little bit, and hence we get to mains, the entrees, and there are a few sides sprinkled on an album with the interludes and whatnot, with onions and preheat. But yeah, for me, there's a huge parallel between being in the kitchen and being in the studio. So
I want to jump in, and there's something that we want to play before we begin. You've prepared something for your fans and for the world that we're going to dig into. But first, just for those who have bought a ticket or are watching on socials, I want to clarify first that if you are watching on social media, we're streaming it for free. But if you go to stageit.com, there's a link in the chat on social, and purchase a ticket, you will get a copy of the album. And also, Julian will be giving away some preset packs, or a preset pack today, to everyone who buys a ticket. And we have a raffle. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for those who are not familiar with this artist, I just want to play a short clip to show him in action. All right, that gives you a taste. So, Julian, that's a groove right there, and I have a lot of questions. We'll save that for another day about where that groove is coming from. But do you want to pre-pave what people are about to watch, and we'll jump into our first clip?
Sure. What are you're about to play? What clip are you about to play?
We're going to go right into your presentation, the making of mains.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I wanted people to have a little more of a concise little video just about the making of this album. So I set up the camera in here and just kind of blabbed at you. Hopefully it doesn't sound like blabber. But the mains was largely created last year. And Lewis, take it away.
All right, let's jump back in.
Hey, thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking today about my new record, Mains, out now on Ropeadope. Really excited about this record. it was a pandemic record. There's probably a lot of pandemic records coming out this year, but yeah, mine was largely created during the pandemic, and it was kind of the silver lining to the whole thing. Just dove right into this record. It's very much a solo project. There are some guests, but it's pretty much just me on the record. It's a full-length album. It's the follow-up to Small Plates. This is an electronic album in the sense that it's all premeditated to a certain degree. However, it's very much influenced by playing live music, and more importantly, improvised live music. The album starts with the sound check. The intro, to me, is so important because it kind of lets you into the lifestyle of what it's like to be a musician who's, not playing major stadiums, but making music with a lot of conviction. In New York or LA or Paris or any of these places where you got these smaller clubs, there's this thing where, you'll show up and the band is literally getting on the stage and plugging in their instruments, testing the snare out, tuning it up, and you could think on one hand that's kind of whack, and it's like you'd rather just show up and hear them play after they've had a nice sound check and a 5-star meal. But there's something invigorating and something kind of that adds to the energy when you just show up in a town or a place or a venue and you got to plug your instrument and play well. And so having done that a lot in my life, and especially with my trio and with bands like The Lesson GK, this is more on that tip, and I wanted you to feel that. So obviously you can click ahead on the record, but it's supposed to invite you in a weird way.
All right, we are back. That was the first clip from Julian's video about the making of mains. And again, I have a million questions, but I'm going to leave it to the musicians because this is very technical stuff. My questions are usually about vibe. So
I'm going to try not to be too technical here, Lewis, but Julian, from what I'm hearing, it's a blend, man. It's this electric album with aspects of premeditated notions, but it's obviously influenced by your love and passion for improv music and live music. In fact, you tell a little story in there, and you're describing how there's times where we pull up to a gig and we have plenty of time, we're sound checking, we're plugging in, we're getting our stuff right, and there's other times where we're like, no man, we gotta hit, we plug in and we just play, and we're working right. That first track, man, that first song that we play is essentially the warm-up thing while the audience is there. Talk to me a little bit about the concept, briefly here on putting this album together.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, this kind of notion that you pull up these venues and you just plug in and it's time to go. I mean, that really kind of concept came from a tour, the final tour we had before the pandemic hit. I remember me, Lenny, and Antoine, the guys who you saw in the intro clip earlier in the trio clip. We were in Russia in the morning, and we're supposed to catch a flight to Italy to play a show that night. And of course, we were supposed to have this kind of leisurely, well, not leisurely, we got up early, got to the airport way in advance. But even despite getting to the airport like 3 hours in advance, we still missed our flight. This was one of the most stressful days ever. And we were heading to Torino in Italy to play at Jazz Club Turin. It was sold out. We were supposed to get there, in the afternoon, have a sound check and a 5-star dinner. But lo and behold, trying to get there, it was almost impossible. I actually had to buy 3 new flights to make it work. And of course, those flights also got delayed. So by the time we showed up at Jazz Club Turin, it was already 10 p.m. The show was supposed to be at 9. And we got there, it was already packed full of people. And here we are coming in, like I literally bust out my laptops to load the sounds onto the Prophet 6 and the Nord Stage 3 that they had gotten for me. Lenny was over there tuning up the drums just like you're hearing people are talking. And more than that, like all of our shows are improvised to a certain extent. We take themes from the record, but there's a lot of just improvising stuff. So when you hear this record, that really kind of has that vibe of just us pulling up and saying, "Hey, start something up, let's go," and let's just see what we can create, despite all the craziness of a day from flying from Moscow, Russia. Just
Man, I so dig that. I'm gonna turn it back over here to Lewis to play the next clip. That's just speaking a little bit about the process of you creating the album. So, thanks, Lewis.
Obviously, all the drums are programmed. That's another thing during the pandemic. For like a week or two, I remember I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna make. Obviously, all the drums are programmed. That's another thing during the pandemic. For like a week or two, I remember I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna make all my own drum samples, and I'm gonna use them on my record. So here, like this hi-hat loop. That's just me playing a ZPT hi-hat, which is a real trash, cheap hi-hat. Sounds pretty cool if you ask me. Through an SM57. In my studio, I just sat there for days making these loops and samples to a point that I did them at all these different BPMs and processed them differently. So I could just literally drop them into my productions and have what I'm looking for, because I know what the feel is supposed to be. So that was definitely one fun part of making the record, is creating all these loops and samples and then using them in the compositions. Even stuff like creating my own 808 style claps, synthesizing those with Serum, and then recording it and processing it. I have a piccolo snare from when I was a kid that my dad bought me when I was like 10 years old, because I was into piccolo snares in the 90s. But I still have that, and I use that to make a lot of these samples. As you can see over here, I have this wonderful vintage OBXA. It's the synth that actually got me into synthesizers. I was on a session in New York at Fab Dupont's studio. Up until that point, I'd only really been playing like piano, mostly piano, and like Rhodes if I was feeling adventurous, or I had a mini synth that I could bring to gigs to get by. But the OBXA opened up the world of synthesis to me, and how deep it is and how beautiful it can be. There's something special about the old analog synthesis. It's more like playing a piano, actually, because it's a living and breathing instrument, to a point that there's actually a moment in this song you'll hear where it glitches out. Yeah, so that was not me messing around with it. That was a Fritzy moment. I was like, all right, cool, let's use that. Maybe I can get a pedal that does that. Yeah, that's another thing I love, is pedals. Pedals that cause glitch, that cause that real life pain. The reason it can be soulful and sound cool is because it's emulating the problems of being an imperfect human.
All right. I was just commenting that I've learned so much this week just from this video. I hope that, and I'm sure that the people who already have some information have learned quite a bit. I want to throw in one of those vibe questions, Julian. As somebody who listens to but is not familiar with the making of quote electronic music, right, sampling and et cetera, I never really fully understood the creative aspect of it. Aside from, I like that sound, I want to use it in my song kind of a vibe. I see you almost, I said to Fabian this morning, just like you have a symphony at your command. You have an entire orchestra at your command, and you're calling this guy up and conducting. It's fascinating to me. Does it feel like that in the process?
Yeah, it does, and it's interesting that you talk about like a symphony, because it definitely feels there's limitless colors basically when you're composing in this fashion of electronic music. And furthermore, my background is actually in like symphonic music and orchestral music. I went to school in New York for composition, and also my parents are both are both musicians. My mom's a concert pianist, and my dad is a symphony conductor. So growing up around that, and it's very informative for like what I'm doing like on this record. And yeah, I'm glad you made that parallel, because it's definitely similar.
Do you go back?
Writing,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead.
Do you go back to some of the early electronic musicians? I guess, as early as the 80s, but probably mostly 90s and early 2000s, right? Do you go back and look at that as sort of rudimentary in this process, or do you find, is there a structure that's built there that you want to sort of, like in jazz, we're respecting the time before? I say we, like I'm involved in it, but go ahead.
It's funny. It's in a way, but in a way not. It's also, I feel like we're almost too close to it still to really know. I mean, let's just talk about the technology first of all. Like Oberheim OBXA, like what we were just talking about in that video. At the time when it came out, it was top of the line, like the most incredible thing that people had ever seen. Mm-hmm. Quickly, it became like you couldn't even, like in the early 90s, you couldn't even sell an OBXA. You'd just take it to the dump for scrap metal. Now, something like the OBXA are in these wonderfully created instruments by people like Tom Oberheim and Dave Smith, Sequential. Mm. Those instruments now are coveted because we found out that actually there was something really, really amazing in there that people were disregarding for many
They were looking to the future, weren't they? They weren't assimilating it in the present for everything that it could do, but trying to make electronic music sound like it came from some future space?
Yeah, I guess. Also, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier. Yeah. Like, if you take a look at groups like Tangerine Dream or Aphex Twin, it's like they're still super relevant, even though, it might have a slightly quote dated sound to it from like the late 80s. But that was just because of all the technological kind of adversities they were up against when they were creating their music. So
yeah, and I'm in a bubble here. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be we had King Britt involved with a label early on, and Gennaro Jarrell, so and DJ Clock, so we've and Takashi Suzuki. So we've had some people in the mix here that and I think it's their time now, in a way, because at the time nobody was really ready for it, and now you look back and you're like, oh, that was amazing.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Shall we jump into the next?
Yeah, let's do it.
First off, say this was the first single from the record, Right Now, and the production was very much inspired by a really wonderful producer from Australia named Maxwell. Maxwell put out a record a few years ago called Beats Volume 1. Not only is the playing and production on it incredible and just soulful and full of feeling and texture and nuance, all that, but it also, to me, is a milestone in the way that beat music is put together. It really helped pull me out of a rut. The way that he contrasts material, A section, B sections, and does transitions, and always is doing something to keep the ear very interested. Also, big inspiration is Zapp and Roger. And then playing with my band, The Lesson GK, also huge inspiration for this track. Since you already heard a little bit of it, I'll just play you some of the outro. I think it's really interesting here that you'll see this as temporary synth solo. This happens a lot where you're like, all right, I definitely want to have a solo here or whatever, and then you just write, temporary or scratch on the track, and then you come back and you try to redo it. You're like, oh, I'm gonna do it better. And then what do you know? The first thing you played was actually the dopest. So I love it when I see in my final mixes that it says temporary and it's the one that got.
Amazing stuff, man. We're getting deep now, bro. We're getting deep into the weeds here. I really I want to geek out for a second because being a musician, being one of the cats coming up in school and just playing, we're always taught to respect our elders and to dig into the music and to pull from that and bring those inspirations to the current day. Transcribe this and that, and that's been really ingrained in me. But one of the things that I heard you speak to was you're doing that also from a production level. And it took me a second to even wrap my brain around that concept, because, I thought I had big ears, but like you're listening to music from a whole different perspective and a whole different lane. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, some of those cats that you mentioned as far as influences and how you're listening to the greats from the past and how you incorporate that today and bring that into your compositions?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, coming up as a jazz pianist, in the jazz world, everybody knows that transcription is like dealing with primary sources in the sense that that's what you should really be checking out if you really want to get good, if you want to immerse yourself in becoming what you love, then, transcribing is the best way. And I remember years back when I made the switch or the mental switch saying, okay, I really want to actually learn production. And the way was I figured it out to pull in tracks that I love and recreate them. And, even last year during the pandemic, I remember with Zapp and Roger, I went through and just took, 3 or 4 of my favorite tracks of his and the band's and brought it into Ableton and transcribed everything, placed it in the mix exactly as well as I could to mimic the original, and designing the synth sounds, listening to the synth sounds, sitting there with my synth and okay, that's a square wave. That's probably, there's a sawtooth an octave above that, slightly detuned. It's got this ADSR on it. Listening to sound, like cats would listen to Cannonball. Keep backing up the record until you get those notes, because that's the only way, and that's the only way now. You can't slow down like a synth sound. You have to just listen to it over and over and over again. So, and with anybody who takes production lessons from me or sound design, that's the first thing I tell them is you obviously have to learn the theory of sound design. So like with basic synthesis, but from there it's like you start taking these 4-bar, 8-bar loops or that are from songs and tracks that you love, and you do your best. And like with drum sounds, like if it's made in the 80s, like by Zapp and Roger, I can point you. I know that, like, for example, Reverb has a free pack of all those samples of those old drum machines. So then it's just like going through there, using your ear and finding in the library, taking out those old books, find those words. How do you spell them? Put them in your production. Wow. And, that to me is the best way to learn.
No, I'm digging it, dude. I'm feeling it. So, Zapp and Roger, you talk about Maxwell. I know those aren't the only 2 cats that you're listening to coming up. Talk a little bit more about these influences. And I think we might even have a track a little bit that speaks to it as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of production, everything from like Tribe Called Quest, J Dill. I mean, there are, landmarks in hip hop production. Teddy Riley of Black Street. I even love like more contemporary like EDM stuff that like I guess not contemporary anymore, but like 10 years ago, Skrillex. When Skrillex came out, I was like, what is this? Like, why are all these kids at these concerts jumping around and like, dude is pressing play? But I tell you what, I got it, and I was like, wow. I mean, if you want to like use higher terms, I mean, Skrillex is an incredible electronic music composer. That's just what it is. Sound designer, and I mean, Skrillex, Zed, all these luminaries in the genre, and I just feel like we're in a time right now where electronic music production is in its heyday. It just the laptop now is what the acoustic guitar was in the 60s.
Wow.
And
the electric.
Right, or the electric guitar too. Yeah, I mean, but it's the thing that everybody can go out and get. Everybody has a laptop. Anybody who has a laptop can download GarageBand and free samples and start making music. I mean, you hear these kids now, like on Spotify, who are making beats in the back of an Uber, and then like rappers are using it's incredible. I mean, let's go back to the playing side of things. I just want people to know that also I do have a lot of influences with piano as well, namely starting with cats like Bill Evans, Oscar Peterson, Herbie, Keith Jarrett, all that. Those two worlds, which at times can be a little conflicting emotionally to me, are joined very much in my heart.
Love it.
And
I got it. I put it. All right. Julian, you were saying.
Well, I mean, as you can hear in that clip, you'll hear a young 22-year-old version of me really trying with all my might to sound like my idol, Brad Mehldau. And it's just something I wanted to talk about briefly because it's interesting to me, and it came up in the past few days. I made a tweet about how there's so much pressure in our culture to have everything figured out by the time you're 22. You have to have your own sound. You have to have, if you haven't played with all the greats by the time you're 22, you're nobody. And I'm glad to be older now and to know that's complete bullshit. And I even remember getting flack, when I was younger. And there's probably flack comments in that video, rightfully so, that it just sounds like a regurgitated Mehldau trio. But the thing is, I think we should be allowed as young artists to mimic our favorite artists. If you listen to Brad Mehldau when he was 22, he sounds very similar to Wynton Kelly, and take Tony Williams. He said, I just wanted to sound like Max Roach for 8 years. And then after that, you get Tony Williams. So my message to the young musicians out there is just take your time and fully dive into whatever you love, like explore it fully. If you need to become somebody for a second, do it, because you'll come out on the other side better. If you say, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to touch that, it can be detrimental. And then you might have a chip on the shoulder for the rest of your life.
Wow. Wise words. Let me jump into the next track.
Started out as an Instagram video, or Instagram beat, as I call them. It's interesting with Instagram. For me, I kind of had a bizarre evolution with putting stuff out on Instagram, in the sense that when I first started my account, I was really trying to push another project. And, but for some reason, I just started posting some videos of me jamming out onto some beats, or just playing some chords or whatever. And I started getting views and attention on these videos. And not that that should ever tell you what you should be doing artistically, but I was finding that I was having a lot of fun making these videos, because I just make a beat or a sketch of an idea, put it up, put it out into the world. And because there was a video component to it, I wasn't as concerned per se about like making sure that the mix was perfect, or making sure that every single element of what I was doing was perfect. It was just, hey, here, I'm making this right now. I'm in the moment. This is what I made. See if you like it. I had fun making it. And I found that it actually was very influential on the way I was putting together material, because I found myself getting bogged down when I would try to make full-fledged arrangements or songs. I was like, why can't I have that same type of immediacy with the arrangements I'm trying to make in Ableton for full songs? I started realizing, hey, I should take these ideas that I'm making really quickly and turn that into an arrangement by means of the brain rather than the heart, because the heart is the part that's creating the material. The brain is dictating how things work together. So yeah, this song started as an Instagram beat, put it out, people seemed to like it, and then I was like, you know what, I really like this one too. I'm gonna turn this into a track for my album. I think the inspiration from that is, you know, Miles Davis. Love Miles. Love the whole late 60s stuff with Herbie, Bitches Brew, all that. Just so vibey, so much feeling, even when it's just one harmony. You know, when we're coming up, it's great to transcribe, especially like, you know, in the jazz world, it's always like, oh, who, you know, transcribe. But in the production world and synthland, it's the same thing. Like, to me, transcribing this sound from Kaytranada is the same thing as me transcribing like a lick from Dexter Gordon or something like that. It's like transcribed sounds. It's the same thing as transcribing lines like on the piano or the horn. You know, and you pull in these different sounds and all of a sudden you have a library that's distinctly yours.
You know, just amazing stuff. It's, you know, we're talking, you know, while the clip is, we're talking behind the scenes how incredible it is, how we have access to this information, and how everyone is just, musicians nowadays are just forthright and just sharing so much information and knowledge, and not just in the music space, just kind of all around. And, you know, Julian, in that last clip, you talked a little bit about, you know, creating some IG beats, I think is how you dubbed it, you know, just kind of going for it, not really worrying about the audio production, because you had some, you know, some dope video quality to it, and just putting it out there. And I appreciate that. And then you talked about, you know, when it came down to putting pen to paper about composing, you know, maybe not having that same inspiration, you know, being a little bit more limited, you know, then kind of going back to the going back to the IG tracks and really building upon that. Can you talk to us just briefly about the process of how you're putting these things together, how you're coming from these quick, snappy ideas, these quick, snappy beats, and then turning them into full, luscious, you know, amazing productions?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I think first of all, you know, when I did those, when I've been doing, and that's still my process. As I said, what's so fun about doing these Instagram beats, because there's a time limit and a general kind of like, it's just going by so fast, who cares? There's a lot of negativity that surrounds that, but there is a silver lining to it, in the sense that if you get into that mindset of creating something fast and not caring so much about it, more truth and more just kind of honesty and, I don't know, to me, good ideas come out from that. And so in terms of the actual process, have played in a band called the Lesson GK, and we've been doing it for many years. And for many years in New York, we had a weekly jam session on Thursday nights that lasted like 5 hours, and the whole night was improvised. But we wanted to make it sound like everything you heard was pre-written. So, we'd come out, and Lenny, the drummer in the band, would point to one of us, me or Christian or Nick, one of the keyboard players, say, start something up. So we'd, either we'd had a few things in our arsenal that we were ready to start playing, but oftentimes those were not the best things. Often it was when I'm sitting there feeling the crowd being like, G minor, okay, play, and like kind of just getting into this thing and feeling the room, and lo and behold, and within a minute we'd have like some sort of cool vibe happening, like a loop, and then like drums would come in, bass would come in, Christian or Nick would come in with an idea with a contrary motion to what I was doing, or vice versa. And so that was very informative. Then when I come back to the studio, a lot of the IG beats would start, I would just put on a click. I just have like a BPM in mind, and I'd sit, put the camera on, play one of my keyboards, and that was it. And then I'd add all the other parts. So within a half hour, I'd have something. And I always thought, okay, I'm just going to put this out there as a fun little thing. But as I just told you in that video, I'd sit when I was making my album, and I wouldn't be able to come up with something because there was so much pressure to be like, this needs to be the greatest thing that you've ever written. So I was like, man, I just got to have that mentality, just kind of not giving a fuck, so.
No, absolutely, and it's a sense of maturity to be able to think that way. That's a process. That's definitely not a young man's game, but the more we pay for it, the more conversations that we have around how we approach these things. I know it's inspirational to a lot of people out there. I know we're getting ready to do a little after party and kind of shake things up here, but I believe we have maybe another clip. Okay, great.
As I said earlier, I'm a big foodie. It's interesting how, to me, after a long day in the studio, when I go to cook dinner, it's a big switch, and it's a yin to the yang, but the process is so similar that if I've been creative all day in the studio and I go into the kitchen, and I kind of bring some of that studio creativity with me. My man Lenny the Ox Reese on the drums. Lenny is one of my greatest friends and collaborators. He's been a tremendous influence on my musicianship and what I value in music. I love the way he solos. The way he's developed the instrument is just incredible. I love his feel. I hope you enjoyed this little presentation on my record. I had a great time making it. I really look forward to bringing this music out on the road and performing live. Hope to see you out there in person one of these days sometime soon. Thanks for watching.
Wow. Welcome back, everybody. I want to say thanks to everyone who has purchased a ticket today and is joining us and is getting this wealth of information from J3PO. We are here at the Ropeadope Room. This is the Ropeadope Music and Arts Festival. If you are watching this for free right now on Facebook, it's going to go off for a little while. It's going to come back on at 4 o'clock because we've got a little private hang in the green room for all of the ticket holders. And Fabian, we want to close it out here for a minute. Say goodbye to the public and hello to the green room.
That's right. Well, all you guys on YouTube and Facebook world, stay tuned because at the top of the hour we'll be back with some more music from the Music and Arts Festival here at Ropeadope. But like Lewis mentioned, we're going to kind of go into the green room and hang out with the cool kids, if you will. I know we have some raffles and some prizes to give away. I know we have some questions in the audience too. So we'll catch you guys back a little bit after the top of the hour. But for all of you guys who are hanging out and staying, there's going to be actually a Zoom link that's dropped in by by Ben Matheson. He's going to drop a Zoom link in here where you guys can actually join the room and hang out here with us. I know there's been questions coming in. This is your opportunity to kind of hang and get some questions. I'm getting people coming in here right now. So
okay, good.
I will add them as we are doing that.
All right, I'm going to just finish up with the clip from J3PO's album, which is out today, June 4th, 2021, and j3po.bandcamp.com is the place to go to pick that album up in high quality download, and also to communicate. We want to see your faces in there. Julian's been posting on the app, and check it out and enjoy. Thank you.
Amazing.